Okay, welcome everybody to this interview here, this live interview with Cade. Now, before we get going, what I'd like to do is just do a quick sound check. So for those people who are here already and who have logged into the chat box below, could you just let me know if you can hear me nice and clearly? Just have to type in, yes, all is clear, all is good. So if you can do that right now, that would be a huge help. Okay, yes. Good, getting all the loud and clear. So wonderful. So as we let other people just drop in here over the next couple of minutes, let me just explain to you how this whole thing is going to work. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Chris, and we're going to share the screen together, and you'll be able to see him and present. Well, we'll have an interview together, and we'll hopefully end up. Well, in fact, I know we're going to have an incredible time, and we're going to be afforded with some wonderful information and heart-centered guidance to move us forward into our lives. So just to make this experience smooth, just let you know how it's all going to work. Below this video, you'll see a chat box. That chat box is for you guys to interact with each other. I won't be able to monitor it per se, so feel free to just stay and connect with each other. You don't have to register or sign up. You click on the guest if you just want to just start straight away. However, if you want to log in with your Facebook, you can do that as well. Okay, just having a look here. Oh, and by the way, if the video ever freezes for a moment or it breaks up a little bit, just be patient with it. You know, we're streaming from Costa Rica, and sometimes technology just plays with it. Just run with it, flow with it. It's all good. It's all good. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is below the chat box there is the, what do you call that? There's a question submission form. Feel free to pop a question to us. When a question arrives, I can then relay it and share it with Chris. So that's how, if you want to ask a question, excuse me, that's how we do it. That sound good? So just use the question submission box below. Of course, if you're watching this in the replay, that won't be available. Also, you can turn on audio notifications. Just under the chat box, there's a little box with a little sound symbol. You can click on that, and then you can hear sound notifications when people are chatting to you, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris. Now, Chris Cade, good friend of mine, and we share a lot of similar paths in our journey, and I'm wanting to explore a little bit more about that in a moment when we get him online. But Chris calls himself a reluctant hero. He's a transformational leader of consciousness, a spiritual teacher, had a lot of background in business, martial arts, and a whole range of things, so many things in fact. I think he himself finds it difficult to sometimes define exactly what he does or who he is, because he's very much a man who comes from the moment and draws from the power of the present moment. So I'm really excited because we've got nothing planned. I asked him, I said, what kind of questions do you want to have asked? And he said, just let's wing it, let's just go with it. And that's a man right after my own heart, because I love the spontaneous expression of the heart. So without further ado, I just want to give Chris a big welcome. So Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Christian. I'm really looking forward to exploring today with you.
Wonderful. Yeah, me too. Now I'm just going to bring us both on the screen here together here. So I want to just talk about this thing where, in your biography you share that, you call yourself this reluctant hero. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is I never planned to be sitting here doing any sort of video interviews with you. I had no intention of ever having spirituality in my life. It wasn't a word that I really even used. Back in 2006, I had gotten married. It was July, actually, and an issue came up in my relationship that had come up many times before, which was that my wife at the time had a spiritual path, and I didn't, and she was concerned it would drive us apart. And so that every time it came up, basically, we would discuss for a few hours, and I would nod and smile, and we'd shovel it under the rug again, because quite frankly, I had a kind of closed heart. I had a very simple view of the world. I had my six-figure job, my beautiful wife, my son on the way. I owned my property in sunny California. Life was simple, and I wanted to keep things in my box. And anytime she brought up conflict, it just was something that I didn't have space for in myself. And in July 2006, she said very simply, Chris, either you get a spiritual path or you get a divorce lawyer. And at that point, I didn't like her very much at all. I wanted to throw her through the window. That's not what I did, obviously. So instead, I went to the bookstore and started checking out books, and I found a book that connected with me, that called to me, that basically was an entire book answering the question, why spirituality, what's in it for me? Because that was my perspective. I thought I had everything. I didn't need spirituality in my life. And so I read that book. One thing led to another, synchronicity, the universe guiding me, and I ended up really finding my own spiritual path and discovering what was true for me. And along that path, the entrepreneurial side started to come out, and I realized for me, I wanted to integrate all of my life together, not just the time that I spent meditating or reading spiritual books or doing spiritual workshops. I wanted to live a spiritual life. I wanted my work to be congruent and in alignment with who I was. And the more I walked down the spiritual path, the more I felt really disconnected. I felt like I was no longer really connected to the corporate world. It didn't matter that I had a 6-figure job working from home, no stress, low travel. I mean, it was the perfect job. I actually enjoyed what I was doing most of the time. So it wasn't a bad job at all, but it wasn't me. It was all built on the conditioning of my past, on making decisions on who I thought I should be, because I didn't know who I was or who I wanted to be. And continually, the universe has shown me that it tells me where it wants me to be. I kind of think of myself as a reluctant hero who's getting kind of dragged along for the ride. And the universe looks at me like a Swiss Army knife, really. I mean, it's like, Chris, go here, do that. And that's what I do. So, I've had multiple moves in the last year. I've lived in 4 different states. I've lived in Washington, Oregon, Texas, and now again in California. Just again, the universe says, Chris, this is where you are called to be. And so I show up, and that's one of the joys of having shifted from the corporate world to the entrepreneurial lifestyle is I can work anywhere, I can work anytime, and so when the universe says, I need you to work somewhere else at a different time, I can do that.
Wow, fantastic. And it's so close to, as I said, my own personal story where I left as a chiropractor, just like you, doing something I really loved. It wasn't something that was not great. It was like, it was very fulfilling, but then, like you said, the universe had other plans, and I've often proceeded kicking and screaming.
I've had a few of my kicking and screaming as well until I realized it doesn't work, the universe doesn't care.
Yeah.
Either I do it or I kick and scream and I still do it.
Yeah.
So I've kind of let go of a lot of the kicking and screaming, but it took me a long time.
And it's interesting that one of the ways in which I could disconnect from that calling is through numbing out. And it's interesting because I remember going through some of your work, and I can see that that you do some work with dopamine and dopamine addiction, and how we often get hooked by that ancestral past, and how to kind of navigate our way through it, to manage that, because it's a part of us. Our neurology in some way, shape or form is built on that chemical addiction, and people experience themselves being controlled by their impulses and being in reaction a lot of their lives. And would you say that's a huge part of your work?
In one way, yes, and in one way, no.
So tell us a little bit more about what is it that you do?
What I do is I help people uncover the subconscious blocks that are holding them back from really living consciously, living in the moment, being able to move forward, and especially around taking action in their lives and sticking with it, because so many people will start a new spiritual path or a new meditation practice, a health habit. Maybe they'll start a new diet or exercise or a new relationship. And what they find is this stuttering effect. They'll kind of start and get going, and then they stop. And they don't really know what went wrong. And then they'll try and start again, and then they'll stop. And they don't seem to have, and this is I say they, but I really am talking about myself in the past and sometimes presently, because that's the work that we do. we teach that what we most need to learn. So I myself work with this and use my tools. But really it's about the fact that we often just can't seem to stick with the things that we know are good for us. It doesn't matter that spiritual teachers tell us meditate for 20 minutes a day, and Deepak Chopra says, well, if you don't think you have 20 minutes a day, then you need 2 hours a day. That doesn't matter.
So Chris, why is that? Why is it that, because I think you're right, if I was to ask everybody on the call, just write a list of all the things that you know would serve you, that if you did, it would transform your life. I'm sure most people know, in fact, exactly what to do. So why aren't we doing it?
We're not doing it for a couple of reasons. One, and it really actually it's really one reason, but it's that survival instinct that when we were little, when we were children, when we were babies, we learned that to get what we want in the world, we have to actually manipulate and control our world. It was innocent. We learned that if we cried, mother came and fed us or checked our diaper or did whatever we did. And while we may not have had the kind of attention that we needed to thrive and flourish, the fact is we are all here alive right now because we were able to control our world as a baby to some degree, just to make sure at least our basic needs were met. What happens, though, is as we get older, we start to identify with how we engage in the world. We start to realize, if I want to be fed, I need to be funny. If I want attention, if I want to be loved, then I can't act out. Or we learn things like, if we had a depressed mother, then we will learn, we can't be happy around mommy because it makes her even more upset. And that threatens our inner sense of security, of survival. And what happens then is that gets distorted as we get older, and it gets suppressed. And as we get older, we just start realizing that we still do those very same things in relationships, in employment. We do what it takes to survive, like you and I both did initially, rather than what really fulfills us. And so it starts as a survival instinct. And it's really structured around these stories. A lot of work looks at limiting beliefs. A lot of law of attraction teachings talk about limiting beliefs and transforming limiting beliefs. But very few people look at what actually causes a limiting belief. And we can look at gravity as an example. As a baby, we pick something up, we drop it, we see that it falls. Then, most likely, someone picked it up and handed it to us again. We picked it up, we dropped it. Now, we don't have words like gravity, we didn't take a physics class at this point. All we know is a story that when we drop things, they fall. And, of course, there's another part of that story that someone's there to pick it up. Usually, not always. And so what happens is we develop a belief about that. Gravity makes things fall. We know intuitively that's what happens. The same thing happens in our relationships and our desire to survive. We get these stories about what kind of people are in the world, who cares for us, what we're capable of. Enough times of us trying to express our wants and desires and being told no, we learn our desires don't matter. If we keep trying to do things in the world, take action, and every time we get frustrated, a parent or someone is there to fix it, to make it better, rather than letting us work through the frustration and support us, again, we have the same challenge. We don't learn to complete things. All we do is start a lot of things, and subconsciously we have a belief that says, someone else will fix it for me. Someone else will take care of it. That's how the world works. As we get to adulthood, we realize it doesn't work that way. There's no longer the parents there to do it, and so we find ourselves stuttering when it comes to diet, exercise, even something simple like getting a new job or going for a promotion. Any of those things, we end up starting and stopping and stuttering and maybe working on our resume for 5 minutes every week because we know we quote-unquote should do that, but we don't actually feel invested in doing it. We don't always know why. It's because we have all these stories in our past. And what is really interesting now, and I just came across this research within the last couple of weeks, is that stories are, I've known that stories are intuitively how we learn, how we engage in the world.